Making fruit juice sounds like it should be simple, right? I mean, what's to it? The plant has done all the work for you. It grew up in sunlight and sucked water from the earth, and therefore berries have juice, and all you have to do is extract it, add some sugar, and voila, berry juice. Well, if you have fresh berries, it is a much simpler process. Getting fresh berries can be a bit of a challenge when you're talking about chokeberries. It's easy to go to the grocery store and pick up raspberries and blueberries, watermelons, and things like that, but not many stores are going to carry chokeberries. Again, the taste factor is an issue. Not a lot of sugar in chokeberries, so this is not something people toss onto their cereal. So then, you have to buy dried chokeberries. Now, I mentioned earlier there are several ways of getting chokeberry juice. Most of those ways involve buying bottled chokeberry juice. As I discussed last time, there are several companies out there that will sell you chokeberry concentrate. So this is chokeberry juice that you buy, you add some water, maybe a little sweetener, and you have a really nice, refreshing chokeberry drink. And one bottle of the concentrate can last you a couple weeks or more. Okay, so it's not quite as expensive as it might sound, because it's not like when you get that 16-ounce bottle, it's not like you're going to be drinking straight chokeberry concentrate, because that's too much. It's kind of overkill. So it would last you a while, but it still can be rather pricey. And if you want to save the maximum amount of money, which I do, so I opted to buy the actual dried chokeberries so that I could make my own juice. And I thought it would be an easy, simple process. I was wrong, okay? I've had to drink a lot of gritty, suboptimal tasting chokeberry juice from my earlier attempts at making something that tasted good. However, when I compared my homemade chokeberry juice to the bottled variety, I found the bottled variety was so much better. Just wow, what a difference. What I was producing tasted gritty and unpleasant, and what they had was much smoother and of uniform texture. And I'm like, how do they do that? And so I had to do some research. Not a little research either, a lot of research. And I'm going to be talking about that research before I could finally come up with a formula that would give me a good tasting, smooth consistency product that I want to drink. Not that I drink because it's good for me, but that I actually enjoy. So what the recipe I'm going to give to you today is after much trial and error, and this is the best recipe, the best tasting recipe that I've come across. For those of you that I've discussed chokeberries with and I've talked about making chokeberry juice, I probably gave you my version 1 recipe, and you're drinking it because you're convinced it's good for you, but you're probably not enjoying it very much, okay? Because my early recipes were not very good. Please scrap those. Forget what I told you in those earlier recipes and substitute it with this recipe, because this recipe works. It tastes much better and turns out is far better for you than my earlier versions. Okay? So let's get started. First of all, let's do an unboxing. An unboxing, I mentioned earlier that one of the options that you had for making your own, for getting chokeberry juice, was to go to nuts.com and to buy chokeberries, dried chokeberries in bulk. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I bought the 11-pound package. So here we go. This is an 11-pound box of dried chokeberries, organically grown, okay? So that's what we have here. So let's open this baby up. And we pull out this. And what we see on the inside here are oodles and oodles of dried chokeberries. They have the appearance of black raisins, okay? So that's what we have, 11 pounds of dried chokeberries. So you might be wondering, how do I get those dried chokeberries into chokeberry powder? Well, duh. What you need a food processor. I have a Ninja. I forgot what you call it. A Ninja Professional. It's 1500 watt, and it has 3 settings. And the crush setting does a really good job of taking these dried chokeberries and turning it into chokeberry dust. If you want to really do a number on it, you can throw some dried ice in there while it's spinning around, and that gives you a finer powder. I do regret doing that, though, because when I threw the dried ice in there, it caused my food processor's receptacle to become opaque. It made little tiny scratches, and so it's kind of hard to see through now, and that's not fixable, but it gives you a little bit finer powder. So you might not want to do that because it seems to work just fine without throwing the dry ice in there. So I throw it in there, put it on high for about 10 minutes, and you get this nice fine powder. So what do you do with that powder? Well, I store it away in a container here. So this is basically a container of the dried stuff. Okay, so I have some free in the container there, and then I have some stuff that's extra fine. So if you develop big chunks, because if this hangs around for a while, the moisture in the air will cause it to clump a little bit, and so you might have to throw it back in the food processor to get it into fine, more fine granular state here. Okay, because that's what you want to work with. You want to work with a powder. So chokeberry powder. So that's very simple steps to go from dried chokeberries to chokeberry powder. Simple, just whip out your food processor, throw it in there, and bzz, 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 and you end up with chokeberry powder. So that's step 1, chokeberry powder. Now I'm not going to go through I'm going to describe the steps involved in making chokeberry juice. I'm not going to do it in front of you because it's not necessary. It would take a whole lot of time, and if you follow the instructions, you should be able to do this. It isn't that hard. If you can make bread, this is about as complicated as making bread. Maybe a little bit more complex, but not by much. Okay? So, what are the ingredients that you're going to need to go from chokeberry powder to chokeberry juice? Well, one thing you're going to need is a scale. You're going to need something to weigh the grams out, because what you're going to start with is 100 grams of chokeberry powder. So you need to be able to measure in grams, and so you need yourself a little diet scale here. Okay? So step 1, get yourself a diet scale. What else do you need? Well, you're also going to need a pH monitor. Okay, now I'll explain later why that is, but either you buy yourself a pH probe or pH strips, because you want to get the pH of your solution to 2.5. Okay, now other ingredients that you're going to need are citric acid. Okay, now citric acid is important because your pH needs to be at 2.5, and that's to stabilize your polyphenols, okay? And so the citric acid is what you use to get there. And so that you're going to use anywhere from 3/4 of a teaspoon to a teaspoon of citric acid, okay? And that's how you'll adjust your pH there. Now, as sweetener, I highly recommend the use of agave nectar. I'm not really a big fan of sugar in this because there is anti-diabetic potential with chokeberry juice, and so we don't want to make things that we don't want to contribute to diabetes, and we want healthy blood sugar. So agave nectar has a nice glycemic index compared to sugar. It's very sweet, and so you're going to need anywhere from 3/4 cup to a cup of agave nectar for around 64 ounces of juice. Okay? Less if you don't like it that sweet, you can adjust the sweetener according to your own taste. Okay? Now, as stabilizing agents, you can use two things, one or the other, not both. One is something called carboxymethylcellulose. You can get that on Amazon. Okay, that's something you can use, or you can use xanthan gum. Xanthan gum. Now, what do does carboxymethylcellulose and xanthan gum do? These give the texture. They give you the best texture for your chokeberry juice. So instead of tasting gritty, it tastes smooth and it goes down like oil as opposed to going down like sand and water. So I'm going to discuss the specifics as we go through the recipe, but those are the components. Now, you don't have to buy xanthan gum and carboxymethylcellulose. According to my own experiments, both work well. I do have a preference for xanthan gum, though. You're less likely to have clumps in your juice, and so both will work. And I guess if you use the carboxymethylcellulose and you let it blend a little bit longer, you can get rid of those clumps. But they're both good. They're both good choices. But I have a slight preference for xanthan gum, and again, that's to help with the texture of the juice. So let's get started. What do we do? All right, so what we want to do is we want to make a 64-ounce pitcher full of chokeberry juice. That's our objective. So you start with 100 grams of chokeberry powder. You're going to lose about 50 of them, because 50 of those grams will be insoluble fiber. You're still going to get some of that insoluble fiber in the juice, but those are the large particles, the big, heavy chunks of insoluble fiber. And so you're going to lose that, and we're going to filter that out. And so when you start with 100 grams, that gives you 50 grams total in your 64-ounce pitcher of chokeberry juice. And that will, if you drink 8 ounces a day, that's going to give you about 3,500, actually a little bit better than 3,500 milligrams of chokeberry per day. Okay? And that corresponds to what we saw in a lot of those clinical trials with the rats. And so that's why I'm recommending that particular dose. So that's it. Okay? So start with 100 grams. You're going to measure those out on your scale here. So what you do is you take yourself a little plastic bowl, you set it on the scale, you tare the scale, so when you push on, and then you zero it with your empty container, and then you dump your chokeberries and your chokeberry powder on that until it reaches 100 grams. And so that 100 grams is going to go in your food processor. Okay, so you take that and whoosh in there. Okay? So, once you do that, now we're ready to add our water. Now what we're going to do is, I'm not going to add 64 ounces at this time. What we're going to do is make a concentrate, so that I'm going to make 32 ounces that is concentrated, so that when I pour myself my chokeberry juice during the day, I can dilute it from, let's say, 4 ounces to 8 ounces. Or I can just drink the concentrated, because it's going to be extra sweet and extra thick, but if I want to get it over real quick and just get my polyphenols, I can do it that way as well. All right, so you add your 32 ounces of water to your 100 grams of chokeberry powder. And then you turn on your processor and you get it all mixed together there, okay? Now, the next step is we're going to do some filtering here, because we've got everything in this, the big insoluble chunks as well as the juice fraction, and we want to get rid of those insoluble things, and so we're going to need a strainer. Did I talk about the strainer? Now you're gonna have a bowl that you're going to collect your juice in. So you take that bowl and you set this over the lip of that bowl, and then you pour your liquid, your chokeberry juice, from the receptacle, from your food processor, through this into your plastic bowl. So you pour that through, and then as you pour it through, what you're going to notice is you're going to get a collection of insoluble crud or insoluble chokeberry powder on the surface of your strainer. And so you take a very wide spoon like this here, and you tamp it down. And so you're squeeze, so you're pushing through all of the liquid chokeberry that's small enough to go through your sieve. And you just push that down, and so what you're going to end up with is this hard chunk of insoluble chokeberry. Okay, so there you go. All right, and then this chunk that you have at the very end, you can toss that. Now, if you want to get all of the benefits of the fiber, and you really want to go all out and you want to get every little bit of that fiber because it is good for you, you can do that. There are mechanisms you can use to break this up so that it too will go into your solution. You can try cooking it and then redoing it, adding a little water and cooking it, and bring it to a boil and then pushing that through, because you don't care about the lot. The reason I don't recommend cooking chokeberry powder is that you lose polyphenols. But when you get down to that hard chunk that won't go through your strainer, that's mostly fiber anyway. So you're just going after the fiber. So if you want to do some extra work and heat that up and then try it again, that will give you a little bit more. But I don't know if it's really worth it, to be honest. That's extra work. Another technique that I did find is use ultrasonification. If you have an ultrasonic disruptor, basically you expose this, you add a little water and expose it to an ultrasonic disruptor at 200 watts for an hour, and that will take about half of these particulates and make them so small that they go through the sieve. And so if you really want to go all out and get that extra fiber, you can. It's a lot of extra work, and I don't know if that little bit of extra fiber is worth it. So personally, I don't do that, but that is an option that you have. So anyway, so you go through there, you get that insoluble matter, and you toss the insoluble matter, and now you have a plastic bowl full of chokeberry juice. So it's not ready to drink yet. We've got a few things to do to get this in shape for actual drinking. It's not sweetened yet. It's not stabilized. The texture is not that great. So if you try to drink it, it will be quite bitter. There is no sweetness at all, and it's bitter and gritty. So not a lot of fun to drink it in its current state. So we have some work to do. So what do? Well, dump it back into our food processor, okay? So you're going to take that juice, pour it back in here, and when you do that, you're going to add some things. First of all, what we want to do is the flavor is much better with a little bit of lemon juice. What a difference that makes. Wow. So that's a big thing. You need to add a little bit of lemon juice. I recommend 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. So 2 teaspoons of lemon juice goes in here, all right? And then turn on your food processor to mix that around. So now that you've got that mixed around, what we need to do is adjust our pH. The pH needs to drop down to 2.5. So it's going to be in the late 3s right now. So either we use an actual pH tester. The one I have is from Vantacool. Yeah. Vantacool pH tester. It's cool, right? Okay. All right. So Vantacool. Well, it doesn't have to be that brand. I don't care what brand you get, but you want to get a pH tester and dunk it into your solution and look at the pH. And so what do you do with that information? You have the pH and it's going to say 3.6 or something like that. Well, that's not low enough. You want a pH of 2.5. Why? Because at those higher pHs, over time, you substantially lose polyphenols. The whole reason you're drinking this is to get those polyphenols. You're trying to slow down the aging process, improve your health. Okay? And those are the reasons that you're drinking it. You don't want to lose polyphenols. So that's why it's incredibly important that you stabilize your polyphenols with the lower pH. And so that's where you add the citric acid. Now, where do you get citric acid? You might be able to find it at the local grocery store. I don't know all the uses in cooking for citric acid, to be honest, but I got mine from the Indian grocery store because a lot of the spices that I use, like turmeric, curcumin, and stuff, I buy all that at the Indian grocery store. They have the best prices. Seriously, when it comes to spices in bulk, go to your local Indian grocery store because you get fantastic deals. Well, citric acid is one of those things that they sell, and really outrageously low price. This was $2.49 for 200 grams. All right, that's you know how much chokeberry juice I can. I'm only going to use like a teaspoon. anywhere like 3/4 of a teaspoon to a teaspoon. All right, so not very much. So real cheap. So you take your citric acid and you add like 1/2 teaspoon at a time. Then turn on your Then you turn on your food processor so that after each teaspoon you go bzz, you mix it around there, and then check your pH again. And so the pH will steadily go down, and you keep adding 1/2 teaspoon of, or 1/4 teaspoon of your citric acid until it gets to 2.5. So somewhere, 2.48, 2.51, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then you stop. You've arrived at the correct pH, and you're good to go. No more pH work necessary, okay? All right, so now we have chokeberry powder suspended in water at the correct pH, and so and we've added our lemon juice. So now, if you could, and then the next thing is your sweetener, okay? And so you add anywhere from 1/2 cup to a cup of agave nectar, and you're gonna have to figure out what you like, because people's taste is very different. I like a sweeter juice. Not everybody has my same like. I mean, some people that don't like that they find my taste way too sweet. That's okay. I mean, it just doesn't matter. You make it as sweet or unsweet as you want. And so I'd recommend trying 1/2 cup to start, because you're making about 64 ounces of this stuff. So start with 1/2 cup and then gradually increase it until you get to a taste that you enjoy. Okay? So, this is where I used to say stop. You were home, you're done. So all you got to do now is when you pour yourself a glass, it's concentrated, so you might want to add water to it, because the polyphenols that you have in 4 ounces, you have was it 2,500? Yeah, like 2,500 milligrams of chokeberry powder, okay? If you can dilute it to 8 ounces, because that's going to be less concentrated. Now, the problem with that product is that it's gritty, man. It's very gritty. And when the first few sips that you take from the top of the pitcher, those are okay, but as time goes on and you start using, you're getting down to the last 1/3 in the pitcher, it's very gritty because it's settled out. And now at the bottom, it's like sip and chew, because the particulates have settled to the bottom. So this is very gritty in texture. Now let me tell you, your brain doesn't like gritty. Your brain interprets gritty as bleh. Okay, and it affects the flavor. It doesn't make any sense. Why should texture affect the flavor? Hey, it does. When your brain tastes grit, it says, I don't like this, and it's not a pleasant flavor. No matter how much berry is in there, that grittiness makes it unpleasant. And so it's a chore when you get to the last 1/3 of your pitcher. This is not tasting too good because it's so gritty. All right, and this is the problem I had is when you buy the more expensive chokeberry juice, off of from Amazon or from other vendors, it's always smooth. It's this slippery smooth texture, and the stuff at the top of the bottle is just the same consistency as the stuff at the bottom. How do they do that? You know how hard it was to find the answer to that question? I didn't even know what keywords to look up. What do you have to add to juice to give it that slippery, oily texture? Well, it turns out that's what a stabilizer is for. And that was not easy even to find that word, okay? So I'm saving you a lot of work, okay, by telling you right up front. It's called a stabilizer, okay? Because you don't learn that in school. All right, I have multiple biochemistry degrees, but they weren't in food biochemistry, so I didn't know what to look for. Turns out I found a paper on mulberry, how to make mulberry juice, and mulberries and chokeberries are really, really similar. And this is how I discovered that the way you suspend those particulates in the solution is through the use of stabilizers. That's what gives these juices their uniform consistency. And there are several that are mentioned, some of the ones I considered earlier were like cornstarch related, or things like in Metamucil, psyllium, okay? But that's so thick. I don't want to be sipping something that I need to eat with a spoon. I don't want a Slurpee. I want something that's still liquidy, something with a nice, smooth texture that I don't eat with a fork, okay? And that's the problem I have with things like psyllium. And turns out in the particular study that I discovered, they looked at multiple stabilizing agents, and the two that gave the best results were carboxymethylcellulose, which I talked about earlier, and xanthan gum. Those were the top choices because they didn't give you this thick, chunky texture, but at the same time they gave you uniformity, so that those particulate sandy aspects, those fiber aspects to the chokeberry juice, they were distributed evenly through your liquid juice, so that when you drank it, it went down like oil, like nice and smooth, and it tasted great. Okay, both of these products work great. Now, I did favor, and the paper, they mentioned that xanthan gum was the best. In terms of the smell, the color, and the texture, xanthan gum won out. And I would agree with that. But it's close. And I don't know which is cheaper. I think this, how much did I pay for this? I forgot how much this is. This was, how many milligrams? This is a pound. So I got a pound of carboxymethylcellulose for 20 bucks. And the xanthan gum, 8 ounces for like $11. So they're pretty close in price. But carboxymethylcellulose, you have to put it in your food processor for longer. Otherwise, if you don't mix it up really well, you'll be drinking and then get something like a big old giant booger in your mouth, okay, because it's kind of slimy, and you'll have those guys. Whereas that never happened with xanthan gum. You get uniform texture with virtually no boogers, okay? So, I mean, both give you a good tasting product, and I want to be fair to carboxymethylcellulose. If you put it in your food processor for long enough, you'll get it nice and uniform, and I suspect you won't get the booger phenomenon, okay? So, and I didn't, with regard to Chokeberry, in terms of the color, I thought they were the same. The color was about the same. The texture, about the same. I think a slight benefit to xanthan gum, though. I mean, in all honesty, I used about a 1/4 teaspoon for both. I did both of them. I did it because I wanted to taste them side by side, and very, very close, but slight advantage to xanthan gum. So I would recommend that you use xanthan gum. Okay, so there you go. Now, when you add your xanthan gum or your carboxymethylcellulose, it goes into your food processor, and you spin that around on high for about, 5 minutes or less, and you're done. Now, I will tell you this, if you drink it right away, it'll be okay, it'll be good, but that's not your final product. It has to sit like overnight, and then that's when you get your full flavor. That's when it will hit you, okay? Because it takes a while for the stabilizer to collect enough water around it and to soak up all of those particulates, all of those chunks of the chokeberry powder, so that you don't taste any sand. I mean, when you drink it the next day, it'll go down silky smooth, all right, with no chunks. And the difference in flavor between this recipe and the old recipe without the use of stabilizing is huge. If you want to experiment, go ahead and try it. If you're gonna buy the 11-pound box, then you have so much you can totally experiment yourself. But the flavor is amazing. It tastes so much better. It kind of reminds me of, when I go to the movies, one of the things I like to get are those berry Slurpees with the icy. That's what it reminds me of. The flavor is like a berry icy without the chunks of ice, but that regarding like a syrupy texture and the flavor, that's what it reminds me of. As opposed to without it, it's kind of like a prune flavor. It's like cross between a more like between prune and blueberry, but mostly prune. Okay, so the flavor of this recipe that I just gave you is so much better. What I want to talk about next is the food biochemistry behind the recipe that I just gave you. So, is it easy to make fruit juice? All you need is common sense. That was my approach when I first started, but no, it's a lot more complicated than that, and I'm going to explain why that is. What you want is, if you just powderize the dried chokeberries and add that powder to water, what you end up with is a very inconsistent liquid. At the very top of the top third of your chokeberry solution would be the taste will be rather dilute, but you'll have a nice texture there. But when you get to those lower textures, that middle segment, you'll have a thicker texture, but the flavor will be ideal. That's kind of the flavor that you want. But when you get to that bottom third, whoa, now it's slurp and chew. You take a sip, and then you have to chew all the gritty debris that's on your tongue because it's so thick at the bottom. So if you had something called a gritometer, you would have something like 1,000 parts per liter in that top third, and maybe 7,000 parts per liter in the midsection. But at the bottom, you've got like 22,000 parts per liter, and that's that. So you got this thick chokeberry solution. At the bottom, we have sediment consisting of non-soluble fruit fiber. All right. Now, what we would like to see is a gritometer reading that is uniform. So you have like 10,000 parts per liter in the top third, the middle third, and the bottom third. So it doesn't matter where in the picture you're drawing from, you're getting the same consistency and a good tasting consistency. And here's the article that I was referring to where they looked at different types of stabilizers on the physical and sensory characteristics of mulberry fruit juice. So again, mulberries and chokeberries are really similar. This paper also discussed the importance of pH. So xanthan gum was superior to maintaining taste, color, and consistency of the fruit juice compared to carboxymethylcellulose. Now, you're drinking this because it's good for you, and you want to maximize the health benefits. So you want to maximize anthocyanins and other polyphenols. You don't want them to degrade. And so what they did was they played with it, and under certain physical conditions, such as high heat and higher pH, they found that you lost your polyphenols. So using high heat destroyed polyphenols, and maintaining a higher pH caused deterioration of the polyphenols. And here we see a graph here showing that as your temperature goes up, over time, your anthocyanin content goes down substantially. You don't want your juice to be losing polyphenols over time. So temperature is something that you don't want to use a high temperature for any extended period of time. And here we see the effects of pH on your anthocyanin levels. And as you see here, look at the difference between a pH of 8 and a pH of 2.5. So as you can see, the milligrams of your primary anthocyanin are way higher with the 2.5 pH compared to the 8.0 pH. So as you can see there, that's a big difference. I mean, just between 4 and 2.5, notice that there's over 100 milligrams per liter difference. They did use some heat in their preparation. They pasteurized it by heating it to 158 degrees Celsius for 5 minutes. My 64-ounce pitcher doesn't last very long, so I'm not really worried about bacteria eating it up. It's not like it's going to be in the refrigerator for a couple months. So I don't, I do use hot water when I add that 32 ounces of water to begin with. The water is hot, so that does give you some, this offers some protection from bacterial overgrowth. Here we see the description of the ingredients that you're going to be using. 100 grams of chokeberry powder. Why 100 grams? You're not going to actually be consuming all 100, but about half of that is going to be lost as large insoluble fibers. Okay? About 250 milligrams of xanthan gum. about 3/4 teaspoon of citric acid, 3/4 to a full teaspoon. Again, this is what you're using to adjust your pH. The agave nectar to your liking, anywhere from a half a cup to a cup. 2 teaspoons of lemon juice, and then you're using either pH strips or an actual pH tester. And then ultimately you're using 64 ounces of water, but I recommend starting out with 32 ounces of water, and then that'll give you a 32-ounce pitcher full, but then when you prepare it, you can add the other water to it. Or you can drink it in its double form, that way you don't have to drink as much. So you can drink 4 ounces of this 32-ounce solution, but keep in mind that 32-ounce solution is concentrated. So you might not like the concentrated berry drink. It might be too strong for you, so you can always add more water to it. You can adjust it to whatever you like. Okay, now a few things that trial and error things that I discovered. One is always make sure that you add your 2 teaspoons of lemon juice before you adjust the pH with the citric acid, okay, because that lemon juice is going to affect the pH as well. So do the lemon juice first and then adjust your pH with the citric acid. So if you follow this recipe, what you will do is you will give yourself 16 servings of 2-ounce drinks, and each serving contains 3,100 milligrams of chokeberry, okay? Well, if you buy the 11-pound box, the cost to you, that's 100 64-ounce servings or 1,600 4-ounce servings, okay? And that, if you drink it once a day, that'll last you over 4 years. And the cost is going to be about 10 cents a day. So anywhere between 10 and 20 cents a day, that's what the cost is. And that is substantially less than what the cost would be if you were to buy the individual bottles of chokeberry juice from any of those vendors. But as you can see, it's going to be a little bit more work. I will tell you this, the more you do this, the easier it might seem kind of complicated now, but trust me, when you've done this 2 or 3 times, it becomes automatic, and it's not that hard at all. It's just a little bit harder than making Kool-Aid, all right? But you do have to make use of your food processor. You do need to get a pH meter, and so there are a few things here that are more complicated than normal cooking. But I'm telling you, please try it out, and I'm telling you now, the flavor is, I actually prefer the flavor of my homemade chokeberry juice compared to those other products. And those other products are good. They're both great choices, all right? A friend of mine made the suggestion that I should try to sell it, and if I had any type of business sense, and I like stuff like that, it's not a bad idea, but I hate stuff like that, and so I'm offering it to you guys for free, and I hope you make some use out of it. The health benefits, as I said before, are so impressive, and I'm doing this predominantly for the benefit of my patients. I'm trying to help you guys, and this is something that can really make a big difference that doesn't cost a lot. Now, another way of getting chokeberries, and I'm going to say this here, is if you buy the dried chokeberries and you throw it through your food processor and you make chokeberry powder, you can actually put that in capsules and get your chokeberry that way every day. And so the recommended dose, again, is 2,500 milligrams a day. So if you use those capsules that normally hold 500 milligrams, those are the 00 capsules, and you filled it with chokeberry powder, you would have to take 5 of those a day. Okay, so you can do it that way, but I'm telling you, drinking the chokeberry is a much more pleasant experience than swallowing 5 00 capsules full of chokeberry powder. But that's an option that you have. Okay, so thank you for watching. I don't plan on doing a whole lot more with chokeberries, so this is kind of the last one, but probably not the last one, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. The stuff that I talked about before, a lot of the studies showing all the benefits, keep in mind, those were in animal models or based on mechanism of action, petri dish things, and so we're a long way from a lot of human trials to confirm the health benefits that I described. So as we get human trials, I will be periodically reporting on that. But for now, this will be my last chokeberry presentation for some time. So enjoy, and thanks for watching.